Today's story is titled Risen by the Republic. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. The smell of rain is in the air. My mind fails to conceive of an even better scent than that of fresh vapor. Not a moment too soon either, for the small town can finally reign in the festivities that April brings. Rejoice, for he has risen. All the ladies and gentlemen in attendance drag their shoes through watered grass, their Sunday's best in accordance with the day, but the day is better suited for the children. A few of the boys and I hid the treasures throughout the meadow in preparation, all while the participants were getting ready to start their engines. Us adults were already dividing out the portions for everyone's dish. The missus was itching to bust out the old roaster for a lamb, and I could finally whip up some of my cherished sweets. As everyone had gotten their fill, the children were becoming restless. I got up from my seat, made my way to the edge of the meadow, and sounded the race. Before I could finish up my call, they were off. Off they went, to flip every rock, to round every tree, and to comb through every dense bundle of flowers. Satisfied, I went back to my table and poured myself a big cup of tea. Parents who were concerned with their children's safety went to help out with the search. Those who stayed were in for a treat of cake, tarts, and biscuits. Tea, dark as stained glass, never tasted sweeter. We spent most of the morning socializing, but our leisure time was cut short by the fierce wind. Every family was in attendance. From the Hanbys to the Nagels, just about every shade of green was here. That especially meant inviting the less than welcoming families. One of these families was the bitter Douglases. Eowyn Douglas, the son of David Douglas, was an unruly child that didn't know when to quit when the going was good. Almost always, he boasted until he made a fool of himself, often by counting his chicks before they hatched. He was the one to throw white river stones into his basket and pass them off as eggs. The little cuss would consider himself clever and deem the scam a success before it was tested. Surprisingly, the little miscreant actually stayed his hand at trickery and filled his basket with 24 eggs. You can imagine my surprise at this, but I took account of everyone's baskets, an average of 10 eggs, except for the 3 finalists. Little Arnie Hanby scored a humble 23 eggs while scouring the flowers in the tall grass. Miss Ayla Nagel was sitting pretty on a proper 24, her infectious smile spreading to everyone. Sadly, this year's winner was Eowyn, who stood with an impressive 25 eggs total. We all gathered with the church to shelter from the aisle's wind. I secluded myself within the back storage room with many baskets in hand. With the winner's basket finally tallied, I double-checked my count. Couldn't be certain on the first go, but the last egg was the one that managed to catch my attention. It was no poultry egg, not even encased within a hard shell. Instead, it was a leathery sack. Writhing, pulsating, and eerily pale, it stood out among the other eggs. That is when it began to crack. Not that the sound was coming from the egg itself, but rather from what was inside. Hollow bones popped out, cartilage slid like wet plates, and developing lungs drew their first breath. Gnawed limbs stretched out over the soft membrane. Every attempt became more labored than the last until it tore through the wet paper. What emerged wasn't an animal so much as it was a thing. I could tell from its breathing that the air stung, but still it drew reprisal. A horrible little misshapen thing, too fresh to do just about anything, surprised me when wings emerged from out beneath its arms. When it took flight, my heart nearly jumped out of its cage. It broke through the ceiling and its skin became slick with rain. The newfound hydration gave volume to its frail frame. A barbed tail trailed closely behind its smoky breath. You'd be forgiven for mistaking its awful guttural call for the crackling of lightning. I was close enough to hear its unfiltered shriek. The following events were nothing short of unfortunate. I was accused of fixing the game, and our family was told firmly that we'd never be allowed to host another event. I had to pay for the hole in the roof out of my own pocket. The Douglas family pierced my frame with scornful eyes, so intense it physically hurt to be in their presence. I was voiceless for much of what had transpired. My only defense was my missus, fighting back all the venom spat my way. From there on forth, a new terror of the night had sprouted. Our safe community became a dwindling population. Youngsters loved to hang out at night, far from supervision, but they put themselves in harm's way through seclusion. That's how our youth went missing, alone, unsuspecting, too late. The more that we went looking for the missing kids, the more the population dropped. Families tried to open up investigations in hopes of getting their children back. As the weeks drew on, every week, old, sick, and injured member of our quaint community disappeared into the night. Some people that didn't take the bait described the lure in great detail. Young voices called out for their parents. Long-lost relatives invited the living to join them in the forest, and heard animals howling in pain. The comforting lies lulled the unwitting into a death too fast to process. There was barely anything to identify those who fell victim. On rare instances, there were pieces small enough to fit inside a coin purse. I couldn't stand to hear mothers wail in anguish, their worlds shattered by police reports. I remember the missus claiming she had heard our son reaching out to her from the garden. It wasn't him. Not really, because I knew my son died years ago. His tombstone jutted out in the graveyard. I should have never taken my eyes off her. I came home to an empty house. A draft let in the cold air from the back door. Tea boiled over in the kettle in her absence. I blame myself for her death. It was wrong. It was undeserved. Most of all, it was an innocent life taken too soon. The remaining few left. Families that knew I was far bigger, leaving those missing pieces behind. I felt guilty. It was my fault. My inaction caused all of this sorrow. My trip into town was plagued by the sight of empty streets and closed shops. I know it's cowardly, but I needed something old and familiar to take my mind off the situation. That's when I saw the last person I was expecting to be standing in a dodgy bar. Sitting all by his lonesome was David. Tired, irritated eyes pierced through me. He didn't give me a chance to greet him as he was interrogating.
Everything that went down did so after April. I've never known someone more suspicious in my life than you.
He seethed through his clenched jaw.
Just tell me. It doesn't matter anymore. Did you do it? Did you kill Eowyn?
I couldn't muster a response fast enough for David. He grabbed me by my collar and interrogated me further.
What'd he even do to you? He was just a kid. He didn't know any better. But that wasn't enough for you. I know you didn't care for us. I know! So please give me the courtesy of an answer. Did you kill Eowyn?
Some bystanders pulled him off me, but I'd be lying if I said his anger wasn't justified. I did kill Eowyn. I let that spawn go, and it lured Eowyn into its clutches. I would be more disappointed if he hadn't tried to kill me. What little I knew ate away at me. I couldn't bear to see this monster spread to other towns and uproot their way of life. I'm gonna do something I should have done to begin with. It's unsettling, the lack of bustle and commotion. It should never be this quiet. I could even hear the hum of streetlights from within my own house. I won't let this kind of silence infect the lives of others. I've already begun to hear the voices myself. Old friends, past relatives, and kind temptations tried to lull me into surrender. I knew better than to give in to them. That's when I heard a real voice, one unrehearsed. The wheezing and panting traveled over rattling ribs. It made something of its gibberish, but I wish I hadn't heard its awful voice.
They are safe. Safer now than they had been in months prior.
I wouldn't speak to David because I was afraid of another father's wrath. This, however, was not a person nor an animal that I pitied. I would let it know what I thought of its honeyed words.
You don't get to ruin their memory with that awful snapper of yours.
I granted them the honor of a quick death. Where they went, you cannot follow. I am preparing this place for new arrivals.
It hissed out in a hoarse breath.
You speak boldly. Maybe you'll honor me by stepping inside.
You spared me once before. You won't grant me the same courtesy this time around.
The monster announced as it never once walked into the light.
You've grown.
You fed me well,
it remarked. I ground my teeth to conceal my hatred. I hated that it could announce that fact so boldly. I aimed my double barrel at the open doorway and fired at will.
In former months, that might have ended my existence. It merely serves to inconvenience me when you retaliate.
If smugness can leak out from a row of sharp teeth, then this monster felt it all too well. I couldn't contain my anger. I screamed out towards the dark.
What are you?
It paused for many minutes as it scoured through its attained vocabulary, carefully formulating a bitter and vile response. None came. Instead, it mocked me with a plain statement. Through rasps and hisses, it said,
I am risen again.
Talons relaxed, and the house settled. The wafting of wings bigger than any bird carved silently through the air. I chambered my rounds and fired wildly in its direction. A saddening click brought me out of my rage. I punched my doorway until my knuckles became raw and bloody. My scream found no ears, for there were none to hear my frustration. The weight of my failure brought me down. I cried, knowing which voice it used to mock me. My dear missus should have never been the target of its smear campaign. Her good character was not its to tarnish. I gathered up all my courage and will. I would need it for what was next to come. I'm not really sure if what I saw was really there, but one thing is for certain. I was left dumbfounded that this thing grew and grew, until I inadvertently caused the death of some dear friends. I am the one at fault. My hesitation caused all of this. I will not fail again. I do not intend to return. So I ask of anyone that reads this confession, if I fail to vanquish this evil, then I hope you will finish the deed. Prevent its disease-like existence from flourishing.